Ask Mike, brought to you by the Stadium Shop on Razorback in Fayetteville.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. It's a Tuesday. We're filming it on
There was
Tuesday.
a technical difficulty, as in I've got the whole Ask Mike thing in there, and just half of it went away on Monday.
Yeah, it
right
got
before
deleted.
we went on, so I didn't have time, so we just moved it to
It was
today.
an Ask Mike ghost that went and deleted everything, but we have a
It was
great show.
Computer glitch, or somebody was sabotaging us. There might be somebody out there going, we don't like
Was it?
Ask
I think
Mike.
it was Melissa Lemon. You think it was
Could
Melissa
be,
Lemon?
Could be her. She's out there somewhere
She is out there.
harassing us.
She is out there somewhere. We have a great show for you guys today, so we are going to jump right in because there are plenty of questions that you guys want answered this week. Our first question is from Razor Alex 88, who says, it never gets old beating Tony Vitello. What is DVH's record against Vitello now?
Okay, we got some graphics on this, I think, so let's just take a look. Tony Vitello's record at Tennessee is actually very good. In 5 seasons, he's 213-90. That's 70%. DVH is just over 66%. But head-to-head, it's a wipeout. Vitello is 1-9 against Arkansas. His best chance to improve those numbers came last season when Tennessee went 57-9 and 25-5 in the SEC, but they didn't play each other. Now, it's really hard to believe how far Tennessee has fallen from a year ago. Currently, they are sitting, we got another graphic on this thing. Ooh, look at them all the way down in 5th place. And I think they're only a couple of games out of the total bottom of the entire 14-team SEC. They're maybe 2 games off of the bottom where Tennessee and Ole Miss are. So what's wrong with those guys? Well, we saw them, right?
Yeah.
So it's a really weird team this year. Like they're like 3rd in the nation in team ERA. You would think if you got pitching
3rd in the nation?
3rd in the nation. They lead the SEC in ERA. If you go look at their losses, and I talked about this, I think, on the air the other day before the series started. I think they were in 8 losses they'd had. Now it's now 11 losses. 11 of their 13 losses, I think, they scored 3 runs or less. So what happens is in these losses, they don't hit. So you'd think they don't hit, and their team batting average is low. It's like 13th out of, maybe 12th out of 14 SEC teams. They're close to the bottom in team batting. But they do things like, they lost the first 2 games against Florida, and I think both of them may have been 1-run games.
Yeah, they
were low scoring. But then they came back and scored like 12, 13 double-digit runs in the second. They did the same thing against maybe South Carolina. Lost the first 2 games close, and then just exploded in game 3. So what I told everybody last weekend is when you win the first 2, and they did, I said, man, they're going to get wiped out on Sunday, Arkansas, because this is when these guys hit. Plus, DVH had used up all of his supposed named pitchers, and it just didn't happen. They didn't score. They scored 2 runs.
Yeah.
This is attributable to Arkansas's pitching getting better and their defense being very good. And that's the other contrast that I saw between those 2 teams. The difference between Tennessee's pitching or defense and Arkansas's defense. And finally, Tennessee just letting they were so obsessed with having that first baseman back there in the hole that they just let guys that got on base be halfway to second, and so they're just stealing the ball or stealing the base left and right. When you got on first, you were on second. And I don't know why they were doing that, but then that seemed to cause a lot of anxiety, and then Tennessee made a ton of errors in that game. Now, if you really look at their fielding percentage, it's not horrible. They're not down at the bottom, they're middle of the pack. But in this series, they were awful. They killed themselves in game 2. I think Arkansas got 3 or 4 hits in that game and one fairly big.
Yeah.
And by getting walks and Tennessee making errors. Arkansas scoring off walks, getting on base with walks, and then going all the way around and scoring off errors. So there's that. That's part of what has happened to Tennessee. Now, this is my theory.
Okay. Let's hear it.
I think if you go back to last year and you remember what Tennessee was doing, they did this weird stuff where a guy hits a home run, they'd all run out and they'd put like a crown on him or some weird jacket, and they're all doing stuff in front of the dugout, and plus they would make gestures toward the other team and all this stuff. And it looked like to me that the SEC in the offseason very quietly went to Tennessee's AD and said, hey, if these guys don't tone this down, we're going to get a full-scale brawl next year, and we don't want that. So you need to talk to him, and because Vitello's been real tame. He's kind of gotten in trouble once, maybe went out and maybe got booted from one game.
Yeah.
But he hasn't. He was like a model citizen this past weekend. He didn't hardly complain about anything, and he wasn't mad. And their team was all nice and stuff.
Yeah,
Even when they hit a home run, remember they hit the leadoff home run twice and didn't go bananas. I think it's hurt them. When you got a bunch of, they admitted last year that when Vitello recruited them, part of the recruiting pitch that he made to them was, "Hey, you're coming here. We got mojo. We want you to be in your face to our opponents. We want you to reflect my personality because that's the way I am." And so, yeah, you're recruited to go to Tennessee. Bam, we're going to give it to you. And then all of a sudden, after 2 years, you get told now you can't do that anymore. And they're like, "What? I don't want to be like that." And so now there are a bunch of guys like, "Oh, we have to be nice," and that's not their personality. So it's affected them, and they're pitiful now. It was hard watching Vitello. All these people were mad at him, but when you're used to seeing the way he was, and now he's just all nice, and he went around hugging people.
People wanted him to get mad and get thrown out of the
and he
game.
didn't.
I saw that all over social
and he
media.
Didn't. He just went around being nice and hugging people. "Oh, it's over. Here, I like you, Van Horn. I like you,
Hey, they
Matt
had a glass of wine together recently.
I like you, Matt Hobbs. I like you, Coach Z. I like everybody, you know." And here's Grant Hall's theory. Grant Hall's a guy I've known for like 48 years. He is actually the longest tenured member of the Arkansas media. He started covering the Razorbacks in '69.
Before you?
Yeah, he precedes me by 6 years.
Wow.
He was still in college when he started doing this. And Grant Hall was talking to him the other night on the phone, and he thinks that Vitello has been told by friends here, if you don't tone this down, when DVH retires, you're not even going to get considered for the job because our fans hate you right now.
Wow.
So you, at least when you're around us, you better act polite. And so he thinks that's why he was so toned down. We'll see.
That makes sense.
But I think that's a part of who he is. And I'm still not sure he's the guy for Arkansas at some point in the future because I don't know that he can win if he's not in your face. You can't just take somebody like that with all that mojo and say, now you got to be Mr. Polite. He can't be Dave Van Horn. Dave Van Horn hates all that stuff, all that posturing and all that stuff. He said in a press conference before the season started this year, everybody thought he was talking about Tennessee. He was talking about Ole Miss that day. But he said, "Oh, we don't like guys that are always, bragging and doing this stuff." That's DVH. But Vitello is totally different. So do you want a Vitello to come here and be Mr. Nice Guy and lose? Of course not.
No, you want a guy with mojo.
So just let him be at Tennessee and we can continue to dislike him.
That's your solution for it?
Sure.
Okay, well, we'll see if Tennessee gets any of that mojo back at the end of the season here. Larry Looper says, I heard you say that this is Van Horn's best coaching job. He's had better teams. Why are you so impressed with what he's doing with this bunch?
We had a discussion about this yesterday on air.
We did. It is on our YouTube page if you'd like to go back and check that out.
We all talked about it, and I think we all agreed. They're just doing things that don't make any sense if you're just looking at the stats. I mean, there's everything about this team suggests average batting average in home runs. Even though they've got a home run streak going, they're usually hitting one, not two or three in a game. So their fielding percentage, middle of the pack. ERA is below the middle of the pack. So how are they doing this? And it's number one, DVH is turning these knobs and pushing these buttons and putting the right pitcher in. I mean, I'm sitting there with Alyssa on Friday night, and he's gone with Hunter Holland, and then he brings Hagen Smith in, and I'm going, what is he going to do the next 2 days? He's out of his best pitchers. And what he did was he just got McIntyre pitching well, and he got Dylan Carter pitching well, and he's developed Gage Wood into this. Suddenly he's this closer, and so he's doing all that stuff, and then they're not. I talked last week about if these guys ever all start hitting together, this team is so explosive, there's no telling what they could do. Well, they're not doing that right now, but what's happening is you get a Borfin who suddenly is knocking the cover off the ball in a game, and he's driving you in one game, and then Caleb Calley's doing it in the next game.
He stepped up
and
incredibly.
then Diggs is doing it in another game. And they're not just doing it at the plate. Sometimes there's great defensive plays. There was a lot of defense in this Tennessee series that was critical. So I think there's a thing, the players have talked about this, there's a thing where they're kind of a leadership thing where they're saying, hey, we believe in ourselves and somebody will always step up. And that's how we're sitting here. If you think about it, you've got a middle-of-the-pack team statistically, and they have a game-and-a-half lead over LSU. I don't know if LSU, I haven't looked. I don't know if they're still number one in the nation in baseball.
What, in LSU?
Yeah.
I believe they dropped.
Okay.
I believe they did, but I haven't looked at
until last week anyway, they were number one. But you got a game-and-a-half lead over them. And then, you know, you've moved up from, for the longest, they were 5th overall in the SEC because what was happening in the East, you had all these East teams that for a long time were undefeated. Why? Because they were beating up on teams like Ole Miss and Mississippi State, teams at the bottom of the West. But now they've started to play each other, and they're beating each other. And all of a sudden, in one weekend, Arkansas moves from 5th up to tied for 2nd. I mean, they're knocking on the door there. They keep doing this. They might. Somebody gets to Vanderbilt, they could move on up.
Well, they have South Carolina and Vanderbilt coming up. Those are real test series for this team. How far can this team go?
You do well in those, and maybe, who knows, you might win the SEC.
Gosh, I
and I would have never thought this with this bunch.
Me
so
either.
It really is a special group, and I think Dave Van Horn's done his best coaching job.
I think so as well, Mike. If you had told me that the team that leads the SEC right now, because they do lead the SEC in one stat, and I believe Alyssa said it yesterday, is that they ground out into double plays. That's what they lead, right?
Yes.
they're second in that. Okay, they're second in that. So not as worse as first in the SEC.
And look at what he's dealing with. He's lost all these pitchers. He now has
Jared
Wagner out for maybe a month. And he's just somehow moving people around, like I said, pushing buttons, turning knobs, and making it all happen. This is the genius of DVH.
Oh, I mean, he is just brilliant.
And then you have idiots like me sitting there at the ballpark going, that is so stupid.
You were so mad because you were saying, I just don't know who he's going to use. Who is he going to use? Oh, he's going to start Ben Bybee on Sunday?
Yeah, Ben Bybee. Are you talking about the guy that was started against Little Rock? And I'm like, come on, what are you doing? And then it just works.
It seriously does work. Hey, Alyssa, I wonder if you know this, and she is behind the camera here. We were asking about if LSU had dropped from being number one in the nation. I wonder if you could look at those correct rankings, because we had just brought that up. And I'll get that from her after the next question, okay, Mike? Because I want to make sure we're right on that. I believe they did drop, but I don't know if I'm correct on that this week. Wizard of Hogs says, after the switch to BB core bats in 2011 dramatically reduced the number of home runs and hitting in general, college baseball tweaked the baseball itself to make it livelier. Since that change, things improved and seemed pretty stable until this season. Mid-season numbers indicate a dramatic increase in home runs this year. I know DVH was one of the college coaches that was outspoken in making the changes in 2015. Has anyone asked him if he's aware of another change in the ball this season?
Does that set a record for the longest question?
That was I had to take a second breath.
We should have had 3 pages of graphics on that.
It was a good question, though.
Okay.
I'm excited to hear your thoughts on that.
We still, for whatever reason, we keep not having this happen, and it's usually because I'm not in the press conference myself. But we still haven't asked DVH about this.
We are going to ask him.
But Phil Elson, who's the voice of the radio voice of the baseball team, had talked to him about it because I talked to Phil about this. And he said a couple of weeks ago, Dave Van Horn said to him that he thinks the ball is, what did I put down
here? I'll look.
Firmer.
Firmer.
The ball is firmer this year.
Okay.
And I said, well, did he say he liked that? He said he didn't say anything else, didn't say I like it, didn't say I don't like it, didn't give a reason why he thinks it's firmer. He just said it's firmer. So that's part of the answer. But Phil believes, and it makes sense, that it also could be with this COVID stuff right now, you've still got these guys that normally if you come back after your junior year, you're kind of messed up with the Major League Draft because you have no more options. But now you can come back for a 6th year.
Yeah.
So you could come back for your senior year and still have a year left. So there are more guys doing that. And so it makes for more experienced players, and he thinks that's part of the reason that these numbers are up. And then the other possibility is that almost all schools now have what Arkansas installed a couple of 3 years ago, which is the computers that do both pitching and batting.
I was going to bring that
so
up.
you've got Matt Hobbs, not Matt Hobbs, you've got
Nate Thompson?
Nate Thompson. You've got
good,
Nate
Mike.
Thompson with his launch angle stuff, which we've talked about with the computers, and the bat speed, the ball speed coming off the bat. And so players are working on their swings, which would enable them to hit more home runs. So all of that is a possibility. No one has officially confirmed that the ball is firmer, but DVH thinks it is. And that's why they're hitting more home runs this year and maybe better batting averages.
Do you think it also has something to do with, because over the last few years in college athletics, there has been an emphasis on strength and conditioning programs, even more than before, and they have all these new facilities, like we mentioned.
Yep,
you know, Arkansas,
better weight room,
better weight rooms, and things like that. And you have these guys coming in, these strength and conditioning coaches, that place a huge emphasis on that. I feel like there's something to do with maybe the athletes getting a little bit stronger as well.
Okay.
Overall programs, maybe. I could be wrong on that. But WV Hog fan wants to know when the softball and baseball teams are scheduled for home games the same day. Why are the starting times scheduled so that both games are played at the same time? I'm sure some fans would like to attend both games if the games were played at different times.
Okay, I asked an athletic department spokesman about this, and so he gave several answers here. Number one, he said when at all possible, they do try to have them not conflict with each other. But I think we're getting an answer from our producer.
Oh, yeah, so our producer, Alyssa, just handed me a piece of paper. Oh, LSU is not dropped. They are number one in literally every D1 baseball, Baseball America, USA Today Sports, and Collegiate Baseball.
So this team, this Arkansas team with average numbers statistically, has a game-and-a-half lead over the number one team in the country in their own division. This is just strange. It's just very odd.
Baseball is a weird sport.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I'm sorry.
Okay, so the athletic department spokesman said that they try to not have the overlaps, but there are several issues. He said, first of all, early in the season, when you can't really play night games because it's too cold at night, sometimes you can't avoid that. You can try to schedule them a little bit different, but there's still going to be overlapping times because the sun goes down early. So there's that. He said when you get into later into the season, you can do more of that. But he said, again, sometimes both teams want to play at night to get a bigger crowd. And so once you do that, they're still playing at similar, maybe not exactly at the same time, but one starts at 6 and one starts at 7 or whatever. And then bad weather has a lot to do with it. For instance, if you if you have rain that's coming up and you say, well, we've got to play the games, we were going to play a night game, but it's not going to rain in the afternoon, so we're going to play this game in the afternoon and try to get it out of the way. Well, you have to do that with both teams. So you've got overlap. Now, what if the reverse of that is true? What if you're playing at night to avoid rain in the afternoon? Both of them are playing at night. They don't have a choice. Then when you get rainouts, where a whole day is rained out and you're having to push a game back and have a doubleheader the next day, again, how do you do that? When both teams are playing 2 games that will stretch maybe into 6 hours, you're going to have overlap.
Yeah.
So I guess what he's saying is that they don't intentionally schedule these things to conflict with each other, but there are moments or instances where they do, and there's not any way to avoid it.
Yeah, and TV as well sometimes dictates that
TV
too,
can affect it.
where they only have certain people that are available
I
at
don't
certain
think
times.
that ESPN3 does it, but I think
No.
if you're on the SEC network or ESPN, it definitely can do that.
Well, you also need people to man those sporting events. Can you get, the announcers, the play-by-play guy, the cameramen, can you get them all at certain times, or do you have to?
Yes, that's another factor. Let's say you've got Arkansas scheduled for ESPN3.
Yes.
But you've also got them scheduled for ESPN3. Well, then that would be an instance where you would try to schedule them away from each other so they don't overlap.
Exactly.
But that doesn't happen a lot.
No,
So
but
there's just a number of answers to this question. It's not a simple answer.
No, it's a lot of moving
But common
parts.
sense dictates they're not sitting over there going, hey, we don't care if people go to a baseball game and don't go to the softball game, because that would make Deifel mad.
Yeah.
Courtney Deifel would be like, what are you doing to me?
Yeah.
So it's not intentional.
And Bogle Park has been drawn in great numbers. I mean, you look at the attendance from, even the
Even
last
though
couple
most
of weeks.
of it is in the outfield.
Right, yeah, at
It's
the
not in
berm,
part of the
right?
regular seating. Do they have to pay to go out there?
I don't know. I think you have a ticket. Alyssa has a berm ticket, right? I think
you get
Alyssa
a
has
berm
one.
ticket?
You get a berm ticket, right, to go out to the berm at Bogle Park, and that's
So
where
you do have to pay to go out there. You can't just wander up there and sit there for free. But you could stand out in the parking lot right
Yeah,
behind the fence and watch for free.
Yeah, but you have to have a ticket to get in the berm area. But yeah, it's a nice area out there. That's where I like to sit when we go to softball games. Mousetown asks, same thing. We're going to talk about tickets here. Why doesn't the athletic department do something about ticket scalpers? Somebody bought up the boxcar seating in the Hog Pen for the Tennessee series and was reselling $35 tickets for $130. That kind of ripoff is not good for the baseball team.
Yeah, I don't think that it was the boxcar.
It was the bases
It's
loaded,
the bases
right?
loaded landing.
Yes.
But it was the same thing, and then we were looking on what's that called?
Vivid Seats.
Vivid. It's a website that you can go to and buy tickets.
Yeah, Vivid Seats. Yeah.
You're sold out for A&M, so there's theoretically no tickets, and you want to go. Well, you can go on that site and buy tickets, and we were looking at some of the ticket prices: $250, $300, $400, based on where they were.
For some of them.
So why isn't the athletic department doing something about this? Because it is that's scalping to me.
It is.
And scalping
That's the
is
definition of it.
Scalping is against the law in Arkansas. So what's happening here? Well, I asked the question, didn't get a real answer.
I was there, yes.
So I think what's going on here is, this is speculation on my part. If you're the athletic department, are you going to assign somebody to do this like a detective? Are they going to be going around asking, hey, what they encourage you to do if you have season tickets and you're not going to the game is to send those tickets back to them electronically.
And that's the right thing to do,
and then they will resell them for the face value, and then you will get your money back for that one.
Correct.
But if they choose not to do that because they think it's easier, they might even get a little bit of extra money. If somebody's going to charge $450 for these seats and you pay $35 for them, they might give you $60. So you would like that, right? You're making a little money off
but
this
it's
deal.
not right, Mike.
It's not right. But who's going to enforce this? You're not, as the person who bought the tickets, going to say, hey, we got a cheater here, and I was part of it.
You were also incriminated in my selling of
So you're not going to do that. You're really expecting the athletic department, again, what are they going to employ somebody to go around, be a detective and snoop around and figure out who did what, where, go onto these websites, who bought these tickets, okay, and track the person down. You're in trouble. You can never do this again. So the easy answer to this is supposedly, and I get a lot of supposedly when I talk to people about things, supposedly there's legislation people think is coming up that will legalize scalping in Arkansas. I don't know why they're doing that, but it will legalize scalping. It will change the current law. And when it does, there won't be anything anybody can do about it.
Wow.
And I think the theory is this. This is what I think the theory is. It's a supply and demand thing. If you got a product that's that much in demand and people are willing to pay this much, that's not your fault. That's what they want to do. How do you blame the athletic department when somebody's willing to pay $450 for a seat if they want to do it and some guy's going to make money off of it? Hey,
Yeah, but that money isn't going to the university.
No,
it's going
but
to
it doesn't
Joe
matter.
Schmo who
It
sold
may
his
be,
tickets.
but that's supply and demand. That's business. And it's all about whether somebody's willing to pay for it or not. If you didn't have a baseball team that was really competitive and everybody was excited about it, then you wouldn't have this problem. So and the best example is, you go to these goofy Taylor Swift concerts.
I knew you were going to bring up Taylor Swift.
She's not, how is she country?
She's not country anymore.
Well,
She's like
whatever
pop.
she is, and you go to these things and they're ripping people off with
They
those.
are. They are.
And she doesn't like it, but she's not doing anything about it. Does she hire a bunch of detectives and go after these people and get them?
Well, listen, Ticketmaster's going through a big thing right now because of their part in all of that. I think there is some blame, because we talk about this, some blame on Ticketmaster, Vivid Seats, StubHub, all of those guys that allow scalping to happen. Because here's the thing, Vivid Seats, right? If I'm the owner of Vivid Seats, right, I could technically say, hey, whoa, Mr. Mike Irwin, you can't resell your ticket on our website for $45 when you bought it for $35. You have to resell it for the same amount that you bought it for. They could technically go behind you and say that's what Taylor Swift was fighting for. It's like, I don't want people to buy my seats and then resell them. Although my mom keeps saying, I should resell my seats, Mike, because they're worth like $1,000.
Your mom's wanted you to cheat because she's from Great Britain and they like to cheat over there in England.
They do. They don't like to cheat in Great Britain.
Yes, they do. The Brits are cheaters. They're limeys.
Now we're really getting off topic. Let's get back on.
I'm Scottish. We do not like the Brits.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that.
You're one of them.
And
you're half British.
And I'm half British. There you go.
I'm kidding.
Dr. Strange Pork wants to know, how is it that the baseball SEC tournament seems permanently fixed in Hoover, Alabama, and softball rotates between campuses with as many nice minor league parks located throughout the SEC and a few major league ones as well? Surely rotating the baseball SEC tournament around the SEC and working with minor/major league park schedules could be done. Why don't they? Money, kickbacks, SEC office in Birmingham, 11 miles away.
Okay, let's talk about these softball rotating things, because as Alyssa pointed out earlier today when we were talking about this, they do this years in advance. What is it, Alyssa, 5-6 years in advance?
Yeah.
So 5 years in advance. Arkansas has known 5 years earlier than now that they were going to host the SEC softball tournament. So that gives you 5 years to get ready, 5 years to figure out where your hotels are for everybody, where a team's going to work out when they come in here before they play games.
Field, your
you get
houses
everything
preparate,
right,
yeah,
and
everything.
to make sure tickets are distributed right, and to make sure it's everyone can get in here, get flights in here, different things like that. And that's all well and good, but what the SEC people found out about the baseball tournament, and this happened like 10 or 15, 20 years ago, 2019, 2009, 2012, something like that. They figured out that number one,
2016, you're
okay, 2016, they figured out that the Hoover Met, which is an old minor league park, and the minor league team left there. So the city of Hoover has this ballpark, which they maintain.
It's pretty nice.
And it's nice, and they will rent it to you fairly cheap. And it's perfectly located, because if you go to the Hoover Met, you're going into Hoover, then you're going down all these roads where these hotels and restaurants and everything, and there's a big mall there. And then you go down this one road that takes you to the ballpark, and it dead ends. There's not a lot of weird traffic coming in and out of there. You're either going to the ballpark or leaving the ballpark.
Exactly.
So you're kind of, everything is concentrated in there, including the parking is all right there. Then they've got what they need for the players. They've got the fields for them to work out on and all that. They've got places for them to stay, and it's the same every year, so they're dealing with the same people. And everybody just likes it. It seems to be centrally located. I have yet to run across anybody that went to Hoover and thought it was a bad place to have a tournament.
No.
And they have had it in other places. I think one year they had it in Memphis, and it was awful. They didn't like it.
Ooh.
There were all kinds of problems there.
Where did they have it in? Do you remember what ballpark?
They have this ballpark in Memphis. It's a minor league park.
Oh, yeah. We passed it when we went to the bowl game. I remember.
But people didn't like it. And I just think they feel like it's a nice, safe environment there where people can walk around at night and not have any problems. You get into some of these other major cities, maybe you're having these problems. So I think there's a lot of reasons why they keep it in Hoover, but the main reason is if there were enough complaints by other coaches, hey, we're tired of having to go to Hoover all the time. If you had those complaints, then they'd probably change it, but they don't because everyone sort of agrees, yeah, it's okay to have it there. We like it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good.
And it might be a problem if Alabama and Auburn were really good in baseball and they won it every year, but they're not, so nobody cares.
So they're like, it's fine. We'll have it close to you guys.
And if they ever get good, maybe then people will go, I don't want to play there. It's a home field advantage for Auburn and Alabama. Right now, nobody worries about it.
Yeah, so it's all good. So it's all good. So it's all good right now. Pig's Feet asks, would you evaluate the red-white game? How would you evaluate, the red-white game? And can we learn anything from it, Mike?
Sure we can. In fact, people were complaining about it, but actually I was there, and I prefer an actual scrimmage to a phony baloney red-white game. And I'll tell you why. A red-white game, and I've seen many of them, a spring game, and a lot of schools still do this, where they have an actual game. You know what they do. They put the ones on one team and the twos on the other team, and they beat the stuffings out of them.
They manufacture the plays.
And so people would rather see offense than defense. So you see all these amazing plays on offense, and then you've got the defense over there going up against these twos, and they're intercepting the passes. So the offense looks really good, the defense looks really good, and everybody goes, wow, that was amazing. And it's kind of fake.
It's so fake.
But with a staged scrimmage like you would have in a regular practice, you got ones versus ones. And that's what we had, and over 100 plays. So here's what I saw. This is a little bit controversial. People are going to say you're going after KJ. I'm not, and I'll explain why. I thought KJ was okay. I didn't think he tore it up. He completed 50% of his passes. That's down from his season average last year of over 60%. So he's got some work to do. Now, why was that? Because for one thing, the defense is a lot better, and there's a lot better defensive pressure. They've got 6 DNs. They're planning to use all of them, and they were coming with heat all the time. So he's having to deal with that. He said after the scrimmage, the terminology part of it is different for him. He's still having to get that down. And Sam Pittman even went into this thing, which he didn't want to totally explain, where he said there was a terminology thing that caused a problem, and he wasn't going to get into it, but they're going to get it corrected.
Yeah. And it wasn't on KJ.
No,
it was
but here's the thing. When you come in with a new offense and new terminology, even if you're still using part of what they did use, part of the Kendall Briles stuff, and you've got all this new stuff you're doing, if the terminology is different, it's still a change for KJ. Yeah. And so I just think he's going to look better in the fall. In fact, Sam Pittman suggested that. He said, hey, he's got this summer to work on this stuff, the terminology and all that, and they can go out on their own, and then they have some workouts with the coaches in the summer. Then you got all of August camp. Then you got two mid-major games to start off with, which is different from last year. You don't have a big, tough opponent right off the bat. And your third opponent is BYU coming here, as opposed to you had to go there last year. So it's only the 4th game of the season, 1 month into the season, where you play LSU, a legitimate, tough SEC game. So they've got plenty of time to adjust to this offense. So, yeah, KJ showed, some effects of the new offense, but he had a 65, 70-yard touchdown pass to Isaiah Satania, which was impressive. He threw another touchdown pass, and like I said, completed 50% of his passes. The other thing I saw was the backup quarterback situation much, much better. Jacoby Criswell, who's probably going to be backup, you got a very different situation than you had a year ago. I mean, Pittman was asked point blank, can you win an SEC game with him if KJ can't play in a game? And he said, yes, we can. And so we saw that. Now, the receivers, I was a little bit disappointed in Satania was the only receiver that really stood out a lot. There are guys like the kid from A&M Commerce, Armstrong I think is a very good receiver. Tesla.
Yeah, or Tesla.
Yeah, Tesla. It's the emphasis on not Tesla like the car, but the second syllable, Tesla.
Tesla. Yeah.
He's a Division II transfer, but the guy's tall, he's quick, he's got good hands. We've seen those two guys in other scrimmage or other workout situations and in 11-on-11 situations where they did look good. So I think that's an upgrade. I like Landon Jackson. Let me talk a little bit about Landon Jackson. He was a quarterback, I think, at Little Parkview, and kind of a run-pass guy. But when he came to Arkansas, they said, now we want you as a tight end. The idea was that he's 6'4", 6'5". They were going to put some weight on him and make him a tight end. they decided very quickly, no, let's make him a wide receiver. And then everybody kind of forgot about the guy. Well, I didn't forget about him. I was watching him because I've always been interested in him. And even last year, I've got some video from a preseason practice last year, an August camp practice, where he really looked good at wide receiver. He's tall. He's got good hands. He looked pretty good in this scrimmage, and I think he's going to contribute this year. And then Sam Mbake.
Oh, yes.
So those, I think they've got 5 guys that can go into a rotation. We just don't know how good each of them are. The spring won't tell us that completely. We'll have to learn the rest of it in the fall. But I thought the receiving was good. And then, again, I've mentioned the defense looked really impressive. And then Cam Little.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to kick a 60-plus yard field goal before he's gone here. He's kicked a 58-yarder in that scrimmage. I think before he's, and that was good by about 6 yards.
It was, yeah.
So I think before he's gone, he might not break Steve Little's record of 67 yards. He's going to kick one 62 or 63 yards while he's still here.
Oh, I bet he wants that too. We're going to keep talking about that spring scrimmage a little bit. Terry McAllister says, I thought Satania looked really good in the spring scrimmage, but how come nobody is talking about Mbake? He's got some serious speed too. Why didn't we see more of him last season?
You didn't see more of him last year because they had that rash of injuries in the secondary, and he voluntarily agreed to go over and be in the secondary with the specification that he could come back.
He wanted to come back.
Yeah. So he's back, but you didn't see him a lot after they moved him over there. He's got some wheels. He had a rushing touchdown of 18, 20 yards in which he went end around and showed some serious speed over on that corner, that side, and there's some speed over there at cornerback. So he was quick, and then we saw him get open on one catch, about 18 yards, again, used his quickness. So I think Mbake is one of those guys that we mentioned that's going to be in the rotation. I think they're in good shape with their receivers.
I think they are as well, Mike. After Saturday's spring scrimmage, we had a very special Ask Mike question from the head hog himself, Sam Pittman. He specifically mentioned this as a good Ask Mike question. If you don't tackle in the spring, should you make firm decisions on your depth chart now? He also kind of answered
well,
his own
then
question.
He just proceeded to answer his own question. And what he was basically saying is, and he started off talking, he never mentioned, you know, who the backup quarterback was last year, but he did mention that he made a mistake in making a decision on the backup quarterback based on what happened in the spring. And he said, you really can't do that. He pretty much implied the spring can show you some things, but because you don't have full-scale tackling to the ground, there are things you do not see in a spring period, and certainly in a spring scrimmage. So what he was saying is, you may have an idea of what your depth chart is now, right now, sitting there.
Yeah.
But it should not be firm in your head as a coach, because you want to get into August camp and watch these guys. He seems to remember last year he talked about thudding.
Yeah.
And said we don't do a lot of tackling, and he was explaining why, and you can do as much with thudding. It almost sounds like to me they want to get away from thudding, and it may have something to do with their defense last year. I've always believed this. You have to do it. I know people can get hurt, but you can't go into a football season without tackling. It's not just you don't know what your defense is going to do. You don't know what your offense is going to do. I'm not going to mention this kid's name. It was probably 15 years ago, but Arkansas had a quarterback that kind of redshirted as a freshman, and he was going to be, everybody thought he was the starter as a sophomore. He's coming back as the supposed #1 guy. And in the spring, he was more of a run quarterback than a passing quarterback. He was run-pass, but more run. And he would just take off and go crazy and run 40 yards, do all this stuff. And everybody's like, wow, this guy's great. Then he gets into the first game of the year against a mid-major team, kind of splits right through, almost like a quarterback draw, splits right through the offensive line, runs about 20 yards down the field, and a cornerback peels around behind him, catches him, and slams him into the ground. And he gets around looking at the guy. Well, wait a minute, what are you doing? It's because nobody did that in the fall because he didn't get tackled.
Because he never got tackled.
And he was bad, and he got worse, and he ended up transferring at the end of that year. And I believe he had a false sense of who he was because he went through the whole spring thinking he was Superman, and he never got tackled. You've got to tackle these guys. If you don't, and that's what Sam was saying. How do we know if we don't tackle them how good they are? And he said with KJ, you know, because we already know what he's done in previous seasons. But with these new quarterbacks, as good as they look, we still haven't tackled them. I want to see what they can do in August camp.
Yeah, I think so as well, Mike. We have a little bit of time left and a lot more questions, so we are going to run through these, right, Mike? Hot Dogger wants to know, how is the Longhorn Network going to work with the SEC when they come in 2024? Doesn't ESPN own the rights to them? I'm assuming that they will just transition over to SEC and nothing will really change. Or
the way it's been explained is, it's just like you have ESPN and ESPN2 now. You have SEC Network and SEC Network 2. You have that extra channel
like
now, but most of the time nothing's on it.
Yeah.
Well, now stuff is going to be on it. So if you don't want to watch Feinbaum, there'll be something else on SEC Network 2. And if you don't have streaming, like with ESPN3, which I have, or ESPN Plus, if you have a cable provider, cable company or cable provider or satellite provider, you will get an extra SEC game with that, because they would have one on SEC Network and one on SEC Network 2, and in addition to ESPNU, ESPN, all this other stuff they have.
All the other
so
things.
all of that's going to be good, and you will get extra content, and no, it will not be Longhorn based. The Longhorns may be in it, but it will be all, it'll be like.
But they can't make it
no,
a
they
Longhorn
can't dominate
network.
it. It's just going to be more SEC content.
I like that. I'm excited for that. Marty Bird's Proxy wants to know, does Coach Muss have a pecking order should too many guys want to come back?
This is one of the things that fascinates me, because fans act like when a guy leaves that he automatically decided, I don't want to be here. You have to live on another planet to not understand that behind the scenes, even though they're never going to acknowledge it, it would have to come from the player, that there are times when the head coach says, hey, bub, we liked having you here, but we got this other guy coming in and we're over the limit and you got to go. So yes, I think he does have a pecking order in his head. And when you got a guy that tweets out home, what he's saying is, I want to stay here. And then a week later, he's not here. Do you think he suddenly just changed his mind about this being his home? I can only conclude that somebody over there told him, hey, you need to go find another school, because we got this guy coming in from Louisville, and boy, he's averaging 17 points a game, and we need him, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he has a pecking order.
Yeah, I think so too. Who said that though on Ask Mike last week? So
and you, well, again,
I just want to say,
I would give you credit, because what I did was I assumed that meant that he was staying, and you quite correctly pointed out sometimes there is more to what somebody tweets than what's there.
Exactly, I did, and I stand by that. Hog Redneck says, so the internet is buzzing about this Jordan Walsh tweet. Video of him looking at a basketball goal and pondering what he terms decision. It seems pretty simple. He's deciding to leave or stay.
That's what everybody has said, and then there's been this big argument. Oh, he's got this Razorback on his T-shirt or whatever he's wearing. That means he's staying. And other people go, no, it's so dramatic and sad, he's leaving. And it's hilarious to read all these people and what they're deciding. Here's what I haven't seen. I haven't seen anybody say, what if the decision is not his decision? What if when he talks about decisions, somebody else is making a decision and he has to wait until that decision is made? Now, what does that mean? It could mean Muss is sitting there going, well, boy, I might get this big Michigan center, and if I do, you may have to go. You know, it could mean that, or maybe it doesn't mean that. What if it means I'm getting feedback from the NBA draft people, but I'm waiting to see from them, but it's their decision. What are they going to tell me? Yeah, you could be an early second rounder, you could be a late first rounder, or we're not even going to draft you. So you're waiting for somebody else to make a decision. What if you've decided, I'm going to transfer. I think I might be better off somewhere else. And so you haven't declared for the transfer. You can't tell me you can't put your name out there without being, you can do it. The people do it. So the word gets spread around, hey, this Walsh guy, you might get him. So he gets 2 or 3 people call him and he goes, hey, yeah. And so he's considering certain teams, but what if they haven't decided yet? If they want him, they haven't decided, they'll call him back and say, yeah, we'll take you. And then he enters the portal and goes there. See, so there's, none of those may be true. All of those may be partially true. But the point is, don't just assume that it's his decision he's talking about. It might be somebody else's decision.
Look at you reading into tweets I
got
said.
That from you.
You got that from I love that, Mike. I love that. You're learning. Leroy Hackett says, Musk goes out and gets another guard. What's up with that? How many guards do we need? How about a center?
Like, this is hilarious.
Oh,
I had to go to the dentist today, and he was asking me about this.
Really?
And I said, look, you know how funny this is? What if I came in here today and you're telling me all this stuff I need to do with my teeth, and I'm going, no, I'm sorry, you're wrong. You're making mistakes. I need this, you need to do that, and I'm telling the dentist what he needs to do. It would be ridiculous, but people do that with basketball and football coaches all the time. Okay, so too many guards, right? Well, here's the issue. They had 2 point guards last year. They were both freshmen, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, who are the current point guards that they have before they brought the Louisville kid in?
Yeah, before they brought in L. Ellis?
Yeah, L. Ellis. Who do they have? They had a true freshman point guard named Layden Blocker, and they had the kid out of Washington. He was a sophomore.
Yeah, young guys.
Okay, what is your point guard in a basketball game? He's like the quarterback, and and all you've got is a freshman and a sophomore. So you can bring a fifth-year guy in there. You covered him all the way back when he was in junior college. You were like 12 years old then, right?
I was like 12 years old then. I did cover him in
you
junior
were
college.
You were a junior college reporter.
I was not a junior college reporter. I was a sports writer.
Well, whatever you were, you covered this guy. He's been around the block.
He knows the game.
He's scoring 18 points a game, 41% from the floor, 81% from the line, and he's a fifth-year senior leader. Now, let me tell you something. When he's on the court, somebody's not going to go up to him, I don't like it. He's going to say, hey, bub, shut up. I've been around the block. You're going to do what I tell you to do. They're going to respect this guy because he's not a freshman. He's not a sophomore.
He is a great leader. He is a great leader.
Anybody that questions Musselman for bringing this guy in doesn't understand sports or basketball.
No, they don't. And I've said that to multiple people on social media as well, saying that this might be one of the best pickups that Musk gets, because what if Devo leaves, Mike?
Exactly.
That takes your leadership
away. That takes your leader guy out.
So you need someone to come in who's like an L. Ellis, who is a leader.
And if you look at those previous two teams that each went to the Elite Eight, they had that point guard.
Exactly. You know what? Musk knows what he's talking about, and we do too, Mike. H.L. McCamish asks, name me your 2 all-time favorite Razorbacks. And, Mike, we have to be quick on this because we'll get cut off on YouTube.
I've already thought about this before this question ever got asked, and it's weird because it tells you a lot about me, because these two guys are nothing alike. They're 180 degrees different as athletes from each other. And let me explain it. I'll start with Joe Ferguson. I've talked about it before.
You love Joe Ferguson.
I love him. I didn't cover him as a player. I was in the Army when he was at Arkansas. I covered him as an assistant coach, a quarterbacks coach under Houston Nutt, but he reminded me of Bob Vinoy, the first 8th, 7th grade coach I ever played for. Just, there's no excuses in football. There's no crying in football. There's no pouting in football. If bad things happen to you, get back up, stop whining, quit. If you quit, that's your fault. The only way you're ever going to make it is if you don't quit, even if you don't play. All of these things he believed. And that's what I believe. And I think he was that way as a player. There were no excuses with this guy. And he's still the best quarterback Arkansas has ever had in the NFL. 17 years with Buffalo, right? The Bills. He was really good. Okay, so I liked him. Now over here we have Matt Jones. Matt Jones is the opposite. Matt Jones is the free spirit. Matt Jones was the guy that went, oh, I don't like this play. And where he was at his best is if you have the plan, but the plan breaks down, Matt Jones can solve the problem because he can improvise. Remember Secretariat? Do you know who Secretariat was? Greatest thoroughbred of all time. Secretariat, when he died at 19, they did an autopsy. The horse had a heart twice as big as the average thoroughbred. He was bigger. He was stronger. In human terms, it would be like if you had somebody that had the world record in the 100 meters, but also had the world record in the mile, because that's the difference in the Kentucky Derby, which he holds the record in, and the Belmont Stakes, which is a long race. He could do them both. He was a speed horse, he was a distance horse, and with Secretariat, you don't coach him. You don't get on him and go, whoa, slow down here, you're going too fast.
You just let him.
You just go and go, point, and you go, because he's going to outrun all of them. That was Matt Jones.
Love it.
You don't tell Matt Jones, oh, no, don't do that. He just let him do what he does. And I loved watching him in those overtime games and in games. I loved what he did in Austin where he just went down there and he said, I'm going to make these Longhorn fans hate me. And he was in your face. He was laughing at them. He was pointing at their stupid Longhorn guy. He flipped the football at him after he scores a touchdown. He goes, here's the football, Longhorn goober. Boink. He was just great. And so those are my two favorite for completely different reasons. One was disciplined and organized. One of them, if I had a project that I had to a month and a half to prepare for, I would want Joe Ferguson because he's detailed, he could make it happen, whatever. If I only had a day to prepare for something, I would want Matt Jones because he could just make something happen even though you didn't have a plan.
So you need both of them on your team in your group project, yeah?
Could somebody coach Matt Jones more successfully? I think David Cutcliffe, the quarterback's coach at Tennessee, he was coach at Duke and head coach at Ole Miss, but he was a really great quarterback's coach. I had a parent of a kid that was being recruited by him tell me one time he could coach weird personality quarterbacks, and Matt Jones was a weird personality. He's a free spirit. I can do this. Stop telling me what to do, coach. I know what to do on the field. David Cutcliffe could have coached him because he would have said, go.
I love it. I love the secretariat comparison. That's a really good one. I didn't think about that, but that is a good one. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.